Hello, and welcome to Rebloom, where we talk about facts and empower women. I am your host, Tegan. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of both the ovarian and the uterine cycle. These are two processes and they go hand in hand to prepare the body for life. Whether you're curious about how your hormones rise and fall, or you just want a better understanding of what's really happening, I'm going to be breaking this down into a clear and friendly way. From the growth of follicles to menstruation, I've got you covered. Are you ready? Let's go. So before we start, I just want to say I am a medical science student. This is a topic that I've learnt about in my curriculum, and I have a pretty good idea about what I'm talking about today. So, starting with the basics, the ovarian cycle is a monthly series of events. These are associated with the maturation of an ovum, or more commonly known as an egg, and the cycle is linked to changes in the uterus. This is caused by hormonal changes. So, these hormonal changes are known as a hypothalamic pituitary ovary axis in science, or they're more commonly known as HPO for short. Okay, so the ovarian cycle has three main phases. These are menstrual phase, follicular phase, and secretory phase. So, menstrual phase is most known about. So, this is when the uterus sheds its lining. This lining is called the stratum functionalis. This shedding happens if the corpus luteum, so this is the leftover follicle once the egg is released during ovulation. So corpus luteum degrades, no fertilized egg is implanted. So this causes a loss in a hormone called progesterone. This is commonly known hormone as it is in stuff like HRT and contraception. So this loss of progesterone from the corpus luteum signals to the uterus that it needs to shed its lining, and that's when menstruation happens. Going on to the second phase, follicular phase, this is when we have ovarian estrogen levels rising, another key hormone. So this promotes the repair and the regrowth of this uterine lining that's just been shed. The stratum functionalis that we mentioned previously begins to thicken again, and this prepares the uterus for implantation of a fertilized egg. The third and final stage for the ovarian cycle is the secretory phase. So after ovulation, this corpus luteum that we was just talking about produces both estrogen and progesterone. These hormones cause the uterine lining to become more receptive and stimulate these what we call glandular secretions. So this causes there to be a really good environment for the fertilized egg to become implanted. Okay, so the HPO axis. This is at the heart of the cycle. This is really key for all these hormones to do their job and to know when to do their job. So, starting with the hypothalamus, this releases a hormone called gonadotropin releasing hormone, or more commonly written in science as GnRH. GnRH will stimulate the anterior pituitary, and this will secrete two key hormones. These are follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, and luteinizing hormone, LH. So I'm going to talk about those, and then I'm going to go on to some more key hormones that they cause to increase. So follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, is crucial from puberty and throughout life. So it stimulates the growth of these cells that we call granulosa cells. These cells sit around developing ovarian follicles, so sacs that have an egg in, and this starts the development of these follicles. So they become more mature and they start to grow. These granulosa cells will produce estrogen and inhibin. So estrogen is another key hormone we'll talk about shortly. FSH will also increase LH receptors. So these cells will react better to luteinizing hormone, and this helps the follicles to mature more as well. Going on to luteinizing hormone, this plays a role later on in the cycle compared to FSH, but it's still just as important. So we have the highest level of LH in our body during ovulation. This is typically day 13 to 14 of our cycle. And like I said, this triggers ovulation. So that mature egg is released from the follicle. Luteinizing hormone also works on stimulating the production of Feker cells. So Feker cells produce testosterone, and this will then cause the corpus luteum to start releasing progesterone, a big key hormone. Okay, moving on to estrogen now. Estrogen thickens the uterine lining and it regulates follicle stimulating hormones through a feedback mechanism that we call negative feedback. During ovulation, estrogen exerts negative feedback, and what this means is that follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone stops being produced by the anterior pituitary gland. So next, progesterone. This is secreted by the corpus luteum. Again, just to remind you, that is the follicle that no longer has an egg in it. So once ovulation has happened, the corpus luteum secretes progesterone. This will then further help to thicken and stabilize that uterine lining, and again, it makes it more receptive and more likely for a fertilized egg to implant. The last key hormone I want to mention to you is testosterone. So this is released by these Feker cells that I talked about previously, and testosterone is made naturally in the female body, but it is used to be converted into estrogen, and this is converted by granulosa cells, and you need testosterone to be able to make more estrogen. Okay, so we've talked about the key hormones, we've talked about the key stages. I'm going to talk to you now about what happens and in what order. So we begin with the hypothalamus. So again, this releases gonadotrophin releasing hormone, and this prompts the pituitary to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So follicle stimulating hormone works first. This acts on follicles that we call primordial follicles, so kind of like baby follicles. They're not mature, they're not adult yet. FSH then stimulates their growth, and this increases the amount of LH receptors on the follicle. One follicle will become dominant and fully matured every month. So next we have the Feker interna cells producing testosterone, and this is converted into estrogen by granulosa cells. Around day 14, we have a high surge in luteinizing hormone, and this causes ovulation. Mature egg is released and travels through the fallopian tubes, leaving the corpus luteum behind. The leftover follicle, again, will secrete progesterone, and this prepares a uterine lining to support a fertilized egg. If fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum will degenerate and progesterone levels will then fall as a consequence, and this will trigger menstruation, and then we start right back at the beginning of the cycle. The ovarian cycle is closely linked to the uterine cycle, and the uterine cycle is just changes to the uterine lining. So again, to go over pretty similar stuff because they are very interlinked. Menstruation occurs when progesterone stops due to, again, corpus luteum degeneration. The rising estrogen from the next developing follicle initiates this proliferative phase. So this is a repair and thickening of that uterine lining, the stratum functionalis. Again, after ovulation, we have high levels of progesterone, and this is during what we call the secretory phase. And again, this is just the lining of that uterine becoming glandular, and it causes that really nice environment for the potential fertilized egg. If there is no fertilization, then the cycle again, it will reset with menstruation, we have the shedding, and then we begin again. So you can see here that there's this very intricate change between hormones and what they impact. So again, I've gone through a lot of different cells, I've gone through different stages of the uterine lining, and this is essential for fertility, reproductive health, but also just your everyday health. So Hopefully, this understanding will deepen your appreciation for the female body and how complex it can really be, but also helps you to recognize and manage reproductive health issues. So, if any of you who are listening are going through if any of you are suffering with a condition, or you want to know more if you're, I don't know, trying for a baby potentially, hopefully I hope that this has helped you to understand the female body and just highlight how complex it can be. I know that it can be quite tricky to understand. I hope this episode has allowed you to see how complex the female body is and how vital these hormones and the uterine lining can be for both fertility and reproductive health. Understanding it can help us really appreciate the female body and how complex it can be, and show you how it can be difficult sometimes to understand the body. I hope that if you are trying to understand these cycles, that I have made it a little bit easier for you and that I've helped you to learn something today. But nonetheless, thank you so much for listening to Rebloom. If you have found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who you think might benefit. And remember, you are not alone in your journey. Until next time, take care of yourselves and goodbye.